It has been a while. I said I would do a review after the BZ-74-1, but some things came up. But here it is, MBT-B, finally, after 3 months or 2 months, I don't know, from its release. Here is the review. This is a Tier 9 American auto-reloader heavy tank, sort of like the new Rinoceronte and Progetto 66 line. However, instead of having really a very nice gun, this tank has traded it for armor, as this tank severely lacks DPM. But I'll get right into the stats of this vehicle. Of course, there's a review on my site if you want to check it out without any commentary. But here you can see the armor profile. It is quite solid on flat ground, especially when you compare it to sort of the Rinoceronte's armor profile in Tier 10 or the Progetto 66 in Tier 9. You can see the hull is actually very strong. Even against premium ammo, it is still decent, but I'll get into that in a minute. You can see upper plate impenetrable until you turn it, as that is because the hull is sort of rounded in its shape. Also, it has these weak sort of wings on the side, which makes side scraping just impractical. The turret is also very good at 260mm flat across the front, with only one small weak point, which is hidden by this sort of optical device here. And you can see that in the armor viewer. It is only 180mm thick, but you can't see it in game. It's sort of similar to the weak point on the Kampfpanzer 70. You can see that when you do turn the turret, these sort of triangles, because of the funny shape of the side of the turret, do become weak. So it's not advisable to really be turning the turret or the hull on this tank, just face it forward. But switching to premium ammo, you can see those sort of shoulders, the wings on the edge of the hull, do become very weak, as they are quite a low thickness of just 180, which does mean most premium ammo cuts through easily. The upper plate, you can see, is still slightly red, even against 325 heat, and that is because with enhanced armor on, it does become quite hard for premium ammo of sort of the 310 level to go through. You can see the edges of the hull, just due to the hull being sort of rounded on the front. It is very strong, and the turret, despite it only being 260 flat, does still have some weird sort of angles where you can bounce off, such as down here on the top of this sort of flat area, the gun mantlet of course, and this spaced armor area, which is worth 30. So you can see basically the armor is very good against standard ammo, but against premium ammo it does falter a little. However, still not a very easy penetration, as you do have to aim. You can see here with the armor viewer how the turret front is generally quite penetrable, except for here, which is spaced armor, and these sort of funny odd angles. So you do have to aim a bit, and you'll see that with this view. The spaced armor there is 30 on top of the already thick 260, takes it up to around 300, and of course with the distance and thickness that will be hard for some premium ammo to go through. Another thing to note is the funny shape of the side of this tank's turret. It does cause it to be very strong and very easy to get bounces off, as you can see here. How those weird angles do make it very strong against standard ammo, well, even premium ammo in this case. Actually, that was premium ammo, I didn't even realize. But yeah, turret sides are a bit troll. Using gun depression, you can see that the turret armor does become very slightly stronger at 262, but it's not all that much. The main thing this does is just to make your profile smaller and make it harder for enemies to hit the weak points that you do have on the turret. And you can sort of see the difference between these two views. It's sort of harder to tell where the weak points are when you are using your gun depression, which is an advantage. But overall, pretty good armor for the MBT-B, especially compared to the other sort of similar tanks in tiers 9 and 10. So next, let's move to the gun. This tank mounts a 120mm, similar to the Progetto 66, and it is an auto reloader with 2 shells. As with all auto reloaders, you have sort of several ways to use the gun, just because they can reload their shells one by one. However, you'll see on this tank that doesn't really matter too much. So there's the single shot mode where you can use the best DPM shell, which is shell 2 with 1869 DPM. And that has a 12.52 second reload. However, you'll see that doesn't really matter because shell 1 only has 3 DPM less, so which shell you use doesn't really matter. Then there's the autoloader mode where you just burst 2 shots, then reload the magazine back completely to full, which takes 21.06 seconds. That should say 2, not 3. But with a 4-second intro clip and doing 780 damage in total, this tank has 1867 DPM. Wow, only 1 different to its worst DPM shell and 2 different to its best DPM shell. So you can see it doesn't really matter. And then of course, you can use the gun however you want with its reloads, shell 1 being 12.54 seconds, shell 2 being 12.52 seconds. So, it doesn't really matter how you use the DPM, and on that note of DPM, it is abysmal. 1970 is one of the worst in tier 9, and even worse than a lot of tier 8 tanks which have a 12-second reload with 400 alpha, so you can get out DPM'd by a tier 8 tank if you are on empty and you don't have that second shell. But alpha damage 390, that is pretty good. However, when your DPM is so low, it isn't that impressive at all. 330 on heat, very normal. 500 on HE, also quite normal. Intro clip is 4 seconds, which isn't the worst, though it is quite slow. It's slower than the Progetto 66, for example. So into 4 seconds, it does 780 damage. The tank does have very good penetration. 248 on AP is pretty decent. Heat is what's very nice with 335mm, and HE with 64 is also very good. What isn't so great about this gun other than DPM is the aim time and accuracy stats. You'll see here 3.7/3.9 seconds aim time isn't the worst, but that's only because this tank has pretty good gun handling. The base aim time is noticeably very slow at 2.45 seconds, and so is the dispersion, quite poor at 0.349. When you only have 390 alpha, neither of these stats are really decent at all. They're both pretty mediocre. Luckily, the nice gun handling does balance it out a bit. This tank also has high shell velocity on its heat shells, so if you want to take a long range shot, heat could be a good choice. Overall, this is a good gun, except in a few aspects. It does have very nice penetration, it does have good gun handling, which makes the gun still feel very consistent despite its poor dispersion for its damage and its poor aim time for its damage. On top of that, DPM is very bad, so sort of what this tank loses in its DPM and accuracy, it makes up for with consistency in its overall handling and its nice gun depression. But next, moving to the mobility, this tank is pretty mobile for the amount of armor that it has, going 38 forwards with a very nice 18 in reverse for a heavy tank. That is very good. Traverse speed is also pretty nice, 40.8 and 31.4, and it has pretty good acceleration on top of that at almost 16 horsepower per ton with a very high weight of 64. Its actual acceleration is the same on hard terrain and 12 on medium, which is still very good. Overall, considering how good this tank's armor is, how solid it is compared to its speed, that is very nice mobility level for this level of armor. But next, let me get into the equipment. So, speaking of equipment, improved ventilation or calibrated shells. There's sort of an argument for either because you do have very nice penetration already. Technically, you wouldn't need calibrated shells as you can generally penetrate almost anything you face with that 335 heat. You might want to argue that vents is better because it helps improve the terrible DPM and reload time, and also on the aspect of aim time and dispersion. However, on the other hand, you might argue, well, calibrated shells will help you penetrate more shells, meaning that if you bounce, well, you're not as likely to bounce. So technically your DPM is also improved there. You can go either way on this equipment choice, whether you want the DPM with less penetration, but it's still good penetration, let's be honest, or just have insane penetration to basically never bounce a shot with slightly worse gun handling and reload time. That is up to you. Both work. Of course, defense system as improved modules is useless. Optics, engine accelerator, because this tank has perfectly fine traverse speed, and it is nice to have consistent mobility across all terrain types with that strong engine power. I use enhanced armor just because an extra shot bounced is worth more than that 84 hit points, and with enhanced armor on, due to how strong the front of the turret is, 260mm base, it does give you quite a large improvement on that, and for the hull upper plate as well, especially against the level of penetration you generally face in tier 9. Gun lane drive, of course, because this tank has quite bad aim time for its low alpha, and its shell velocities are already pretty decent with 920 on AP. Refined gun or vertical stabilizer both work. You can use vertical stabilizer if you just want better aim time, but refined gun can be helpful because this tank's aim time is already pretty mediocre, but you can use refined gun to snap those shots in and be very accurate. Toolbox, of course, for repair speed and consumable delivery system, just because it doesn't have any special consumables. So next, moving to the replays. Had a bit of a disconnect there, but that's okay. I have 2 battles in this tank, and I will say they aren't representative of the gameplay of this vehicle, because this tank with its very low DPM, a lot of the time the games it gets are boring 2 to 3k games, at least for my caliber of player. So I have a few which are a little bit more interesting to watch than just the regular 2 to 3k damage, which does happen a fair bit in this tank, since its reload is very slow and it requires a more sort of slow game where you can actually have the chance to reload. So here I'm going to not go right to the front line where the heavy tanks usually go. I'm going to sort of go off to the side where I can take more of a supporting position, where I can still get some early ambush shots into enemies who are crossing, but also provide some crossfire and decide when I need to push in. So one shot into the E100 there. You'll see I am still looking for the second shot, of course, because the DPM on this tank doesn't really matter too much how many shells in the magazine you use. It is worth noting though, sometimes just to sort of preserve the fear factor in the enemy, saving the shell of course can just give you an extra 390 damage for when you need it, so sometimes there are benefits to just not dumping the whole magazine. But here you can see I'm just shooting the Destiny because he's right out in the open and there's really no disadvantage to me to immediately shoot my shells. You can tell the low DPM of this tank compared to other tanks in this tier, even tanks that don't have very high DPM. This is very unimpressive. A 12-second reload. A lot of other tanks would be doing 440 or 460 alpha. Unfortunately that shot does go into the track of the E100 as he reverses, but I do manage to get my second shot in to deal damage. So you can see how this sort of situation is beneficial for a tank like this. The enemies aren't really pushing aggressively, I have the chance to fully reload, and I'm letting my team take the damage. Maybe not the best thing, as I am quickly becoming one of the highest hit point tanks on my team. But now I unloaded both my shots into that Rinoceronte, leaving him on 85 hit points. Basically what I'm doing now is just waiting and deciding whether to go for the Rinoceronte or that E100. But you can see so far I've done 2,700 damage with this tank's low DPM. But you can also see how I am using the gun, how the 2-shot autoloader works, and sort of the situation I'm in to be reloading both my shots or one of my shots. And here you can see I'm pushing against the 183, and I do make that push because I know his turret is at the back of his tank. But now I'm just waiting for the second shot to reload because I'm almost there, may as well wait. And also because both the tanks in front of me could be clippable if I have both shots, but if I shoot one, then they won't be. So now as the game is coming to a close, I decide to push forward and just take a shot from the 183, but unfortunately it's not needed. Against this mouse, you'll notice my penetration. I am running vents in this battle, and you can see that with the 335 penetration, it's still no problem to go through the side of the mouse at that angle. Though of course, with calibrated shells, your penetration will be much more. So here you'll actually be able to see me using the good mobility of the tank, how it's getting up to its speed, since I didn't really show it too much in this battle. I'm not really going to bother aiming for the T95's weak points because I am moving. I just go for the side and get the kill shot. So that battle, 4,500 damage, not bad for a tank with less than 2,000 DPM. And you can sort of see what I mean. Up to the point where I had 2,600, 3,000 damage, it just wasn't a very interesting game. I was just sitting there reloading the whole time, shooting every now and then. But that was an ace, which is nice. I do make 150,000 credits, which is pretty good. But moving to the next battle. So the next battle, also on the same map, but this time I am top tier against lower tier tanks, and you'll see a trend happening in this battle, but you'll have to wait till the end to see what happens. But again, the same spawn. This time the difference is I am top tier, meaning my armour is very good now, and even premium ammo from many of the enemy tanks won't be able to go through my upper plate or turret front. Meaning I can be a bit more confident in how I play, and the DPM of this tank, while still bad against tier 8s, is going to be less of a disadvantage, especially combined with my mobility and armour. So here you'll see I just go in against that 53 TP, he bounces and I put in both shots, just to give me a big hit point advantage. So now there are two heavy tanks here and I am outnumbered, but luckily I do manage to bounce the 50 TP. Hoping the Tiger 2 does come into support, and he does, which is nice, meaning that I can play a bit more confidently against these multiple enemy tanks. I decided to just take a shot from the 53 TP, but it's not needed. So now you can see I was sort of debating there whether to wait for the reload because I was only 4 seconds away, but I just choose to take the shot and get the damage as my team is now pushing up and we sort of have the pressure on the enemies. So here unfortunately this Semvente goes in a bit too aggressively and takes a lot of damage, but I decide to ignore the 50 TP and go for the TS5 as he is clippable with my 2 shots and he goes down. So you can see sort of when you want to use the 2 shots a lot of the time just for getting those kills on tanks which have, well, under 800 hit points, which you can take out, which is something that is nice for an auto reloader. Of course, you have the flexibility to choose 1 shot or 2 shots. The thing with this tank is that it just takes a while to reload. Considering we are up 1 tank and all our heavies are still alive, we have quite a bit of a hit point advantage, so I do decide to play quite aggressively towards the middle of the map. And then the FCM pokes over, giving me some nice damage. So I don't know if you've noticed by now, but I've got every kill in the game so far, and this Skoda is just going to feed me another. So let's see if we can get 7 in this battle. But now, just reloading, I'm going to try use some HE on this Scorpion, because of course he does have very weak armor, and this tank's HE, while nothing super amazing on the damage, it does help when your DPM is this low. 500 damage there, almost, and then I do get the last shot just in time as another shot hits the dead Scorpion. So now 6 kills. I'm just hoping to get this kill on the AMX CDA. Considering my heat is 330 damage, I should get the kill, but it low rolls by 50. And I try to ram him, but unfortunately I can't. And the SU-130 PM steals it. So a bit unfortunate there. Getting a little bit unlucky with RNG. I did use heat because I thought I'd need to shoot his front. And you know, the CDA's front is a bit troll. But oh well, still 6 kills is pretty impressive, almost getting the 7th. 4,400 damage again, doing 1,300 blocked because my armor did work a bit against those tier 8 tanks, and 217,000 credits. Getting a bit of a lucky medal from my team for those 6 kills. But MBT-B, this tank is good. However, it's not that interesting or fun to play just because its DPM is very low, and it makes it a bit sort of frustrating and hard to work at times. On top of that, because its accuracy isn't super impressive and its aim time is rather mediocre, sometimes you miss shots you wish you wouldn't, just because, of course, on top of that, your DPM is bad. I'd say if you're interested in this tank, first try the European Tier 9 Heavy, Italian Tier 9 Heavy, the Progetto 66, which is another great tank, very similar to the MBT-B, just a little bit different on what it offers. And I can show that in the comparison here. So these two tanks are quite similar. The Progetto, of course, does have much better DPM with better injury clip, 10 more alpha damage on both of its shells. What is fairly different on the gun as well, what is worse on the Progetto is its penetration. However, that's not the biggest issue. On top of this, while its aim time is slightly worse, it does have better dispersion with very similar gun handling and the same gun depression. Its mobility is almost identical, but the biggest difference between these two tanks is just the DPM, and of course the hull armor on MBT-B is just better. But if you are interested in this tank, yeah, try the Progetto 66 first before committing, because at the moment it is still a fairly expensive tank and it's, I'd say, nothing super interesting or special. Also, especially with other tanks like the Object 752 existing in Tier 9, which is another very strong 2-shot heavy tank. But yeah, that is it, the MBT-B. Been a while in the making, but oh well, it's here. Thanks for watching.